On behalf of the University of Denver, the Daniels College of Business, and the Entrepreneurship of the University of Denver, welcome to our event tonight, Shaping Tomorrow, a dialogue on the future. I'm very, very excited about our extraordinary guests tonight. They're going to give us some of their insight and expertise into how they're seeing the future. About 6 to 8 months ago, when I was thinking about the topic for this event, which is our signature event during our Entrepreneurship Week, I was feeling actually a little overwhelmed at how quickly the velocity in which we have change in the world. And as I was thinking through this, I started to wonder, how can we capture it? How can we think about it? Because over the last 4 years, a lot of crazy things that have happened in this world, we've had a lot of change. A lot of things have been accelerated. The way we learn, the way we work, the way we communicate, the way we travel. All have been accelerated, and a lot of things have been good. Some may argue some of the things maybe not so good. Very much up to debate. But one thing I know is we're going to keep moving fast. If we've seen anything with technology over the last 6 months, especially artificial intelligence and most notably generative AI, things are going to continue to move fast. So what I wanted to do tonight was to bring in some speakers to drop some knowledge, to make us a little bit smarter, and to give us their insight on the future, on their specific topic, their specific area of expertise. One stat that I thought was really interesting is this stat on adoption. To reach 100 million users, generative AI took 60 days. So tonight, sit back, relax for the next 90 minutes and enjoy yourself. And listen to these amazing speakers. So please help me welcome to the stage Chad McWhinney, CEO of McWhinney. He'll be talking about the future of communities. So let's give him a big round of applause.
Great, Josh, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chad McWhinney. Josh, thank you very much. Excited to be here. By a show of hands, how many people are here were born and raised in Colorado? Great, about half. I'm going to talk a little bit about the future of communities. And, if you look at the great places of the world, of the great places of society, most of them weren't created by financial institutions. They were created by patriarchs. They were created by families. Look at DU, this amazing campus here. It was built over a very long period of time. Do you think that DU, if it was bought and sold every 3 to 5 years by Wall Street, would look like it does today? And, obviously the answer is probably not. So as we talk about the future of living in community, I wanted to talk to you about our vision for the future of communities and how I think you're going to really see real estate continue to transform. So this is one of my favorite quotes. If you would understand anything, observe its beginning and its development, by Aristotle. And DU is a great example, right? There was a vision that was put in place many years ago. Every chancellor, every president, every administration has built upon that vision to make it better. But one of the problems with real estate today, and I'll show you some examples here, is a lot of it's bought and sold, and it's traded. And ever since Wall Street got involved and the banks got involved in real estate back in the 70s and 80s, we've had a lot of real estate's been created that today is really obsolescent. And what we do at McWhinney is the opposite of that. So I put this picture up here because this is an example of some buildings that we actually looked at buying to see if we could help transform them. And this is the Denver Energy Center, located on, I think, 17th and Broadway, and 450,000 square feet. We looked at them. They were about 50% leased. To build these buildings new today, just from a cost per square foot standpoint, you're probably $700–800 a square foot. And We had looked to buy them. I think we offered $120, $100 a square foot a few years ago. Luckily, we didn't get them. Recently, I've heard they sold for $60 to $70 a square foot. So maybe 10% of what it would cost to build them for today. And so ask yourself, why is that? And, it's a bunch of big office buildings, not much going on the ground floor, okay location in Denver. But, this, especially with COVID and work from home and stuff like that, what's happened now is companies are realizing that you need to create places that people desire and not require. And a lot of these types of buildings are, you used to be required to come to work all the time, et cetera. Now people can work from home. And so it's really turned the entire real estate industry upside down. You have projects, and I'll talk about them here, like Dairy Block, Denver Union Station, et cetera, which are thriving. And you have projects like this that have lost 90% of their value. So our mission as a company is we create places people love. Places that people come to and not just go through. And as I mentioned, places that people desire and not just require. And I'm going to give you guys some examples here. The pandemic and hybrid work really has changed the way that people work, live, and shop. And there's been several big studies done about real estate throughout the world. And again, what's thriving, what's not, and why. And one of the studies that was done really looked at Europe. Europe's a lot older than the US. A lot of Europe was designed before the automobile. It was designed at the pedestrian scale. And a lot of the communities in Europe are very mixed use. Those communities are really thriving today. The communities in America that are heavy office and were developed primarily around the office worker, et cetera, are really struggling. Luckily for Denver, many years ago, with the advent of Lodo and things like that, a decision was made to really invest in downtown, make it mixed use, et cetera. And so Denver, I would say, is not one of those communities, but there are some communities around the country that are really struggling right now that were primarily developed around office uses and office buildings, primarily. So the cities with office dense real estate and little mixed use development have experienced a lot more out migration than they have in migration. And the studies that were done talks about the business mix and urban structure make a difference at the neighborhood level. This picture that you see here is a project that we're going to be breaking ground on Q1 of 2025. It's called Avenue South at Centerra. If you aren't familiar with Centerra, it's about a 3,000 acre community up in Loveland, Colorado. And this is the heart of our community. It's a 160 acre mixed use development. A couple days ago, Hensel Phelps, the largest construction company, or one of the largest construction companies in the world, just announced they're going to locate their global headquarters here. And when I asked them, why did you pick Avenue South and why did you pick Centerra? They said, we wanted the coolest, hippest project we could find, and you guys fit the bill. So this is, we're anchored by Whole Foods. We'll have Hensel Phelps, big public-private partnership with the city of Loveland. And we're mixing residential and office and retail, a historic barn, et cetera, and really creating things at a pedestrian level. And it's interesting because we're really the only ones doing this right now within our trade area in Northern Colorado. Hensel Phelps had 20 offers to go, but no, we offered something so different than everyone else. And they're like, no, you get the future real estate. We want to be part of your bold vision. So at the building level, it's very important to construct spaces that are adaptable and flexible. Real estate is always changing. Sometimes it makes sense to have retail or office or civic or community or health and wellness or restaurant, et cetera. And this is, how many people in here have been to Dairy Block in downtown Denver? Okay, about half. This is one of our projects here. These are some of the first buildings in Denver. They were built in the mid to late 1800s. And then right next to it, we have brand new buildings. And this is a picture here of looking down the alley at Dairy Block. On the left was Denver's first fire station. And those big openings are where they used to run the horses and water buckets through for the Denver Fire Department. And on the right is a brand new building that offices Prologis and Apple, et cetera. We have no vacancy and we're raising our rents, again, because we've really differentiated our product in a market that You know, Denver right now has the highest office vacancy I think it's had in 30 years. How many have been to Denver Union Station? Great. So Denver Union Station was a project that when we got involved, a lot of people said it was the hood. In fact, our opening night at Denver Union Station in 2014, Dana Crawford, our partner, got up and welcomed everyone to the hood. And this was a really rough part of town. And believe it or not, this building was actually going to be torn down. And we competed with several developers who wanted to make it an office building and said, hey, we don't need any public assistance. We thought about it and said, we want to create this amazing collection of local tenants from Colorado, make it a beautiful hotel and a big public space for the community. And by the way, we need $25 million to make that happen. The community selected us because of our bold vision. And that was before, and there it is after. And proud to say that Union Station, which included the city, Continuum, East-West Partners, McWhinney, everyone that was involved in the entire neighborhood, et cetera, won the 2014 Urban Land Institute Development of the Year globally. So ULI looked at all the new developments in the world in 2014, and they selected Denver Union Station as top honors. So this was before, and there it is after. Here's what what it was before, and this picture is after. So this is, believe it or not, we're renovating right now, and a lot of people said, "Well, you just built it," and we're coming up on our 10 years. This has not been released publicly. You guys get to see it. This is our 10-year remodel, what we're doing inside the Great Hall. We're going to make it even more of a public space for the community. And at the neighborhood level, as I talked about, really the importance of considering mixed-use development. And one of the challenges the industry has is a lot of the industry was built around a single investor, a single bank, and short-term holds. And so I call it widget building. You got a lot of real estate out there as widgets. This is not widgets. This is a great planned campus, college campus. But if you look in the suburbs and stuff like that, you see just a lot of obsolescent type real estate. And I think we have a real opportunity to transform how people live and work and shop. And this is something that McWhinney does day in and day out. We do about $1 billion a year of capital deployment into real estate, so we're pretty active in it. And everything we do is with the intent of creating places that people love. So this is Dairy Block. As I talked about, this is when we started. And this is what it looks like after. This was the alley at Dairy Block before we started. I actually went out and personally took this picture when the shovels went in the ground, said I'm going to come back when it's done and take a picture when it's done. So here's before, and here it is after. And this is a project that we're doing in Lake Tahoe. We acquired Frank Sinatra's former hotel that was built in 1926. It's about 15 acres on Lake Tahoe, and we're going to completely transform it. Another developer had it under contract, again, wanted to tear it down and build something new, and the community came out in arms and said, no, this is history up here. You can't tear it down. Someone said you should get McWhinney involved. They're really good at adaptive reuse, et cetera. So we looked at it and said, how can we honor what's there, not take it down, and do like we did at Denver Union Station? And so this is, it's called the Calneva Resort on 15 acres on Lake Tahoe. This is what it looked like back in the 1920s. It's the only property in America built on a state line. And they did that for Prohibition in 1926 because alcohol was regulated by the states. And so when California came to inspect, they moved the alcohol to the Nevada side. And when Nevada came to inspect, they moved it to the California side. This is what it looks like today. And this is what it's going to look like when we're done. Construction starts next week. This is the famous circle bar inside. Probably the best view of Lake Tahoe from this bar. And this is what it's going to look like when we completely transform it. We have world-class design team on it, et cetera. And part of our job as master developers to really be the architect, if you will, of bringing everyone together to create place. So turning empty spaces into hybrid places will transform cities and prepare them for the dynamic, prosperous future. I think you're seeing a lot. This work from home thing has really been a wake-up call for cities because a lot of the tax base comes from the real estate sector. And as some real estate values have dropped in value a lot, tax revenues are down. So cities are really paying attention to what we do. We have more business than we can keep up with right now. And we're really trying to help transform the industry to really focus on creating long-term value for people in the community and residents and things like that. So here's let's see here. This is a little video. Do you guys have some sound back there? Let's see. Let me back it up one. Let's see. You know what? Well, I'm sure you'll send this around, Josh, and everyone can look at it. It's CNN came out and did a two-minute documentary on Union Station and the place we've created, and it's pretty fun to watch. So with that, I want to say thank you very much.
That was awesome. Truly appreciate it. Okay. So please welcome to the stage. Our next speaker tonight is Murat Kucukvar. Did I get it right? Thank you. Professor of Sustainable Business at the Daniels College of Business. He's going to talk about sustainable consumption tonight. Let's give him a warm round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Murat. You pronunciate my surname perfectly, Josh. Thanks a lot. It is the most difficult part. And I am an assistant professor of sustainable business at the Daniels College of Business. And I am teaching sustainable business related topics in the business school. And today, I would like to talk about the future of consumption and the sustainable consumption. But I can say it is quite unpredictable how the consumption will be in the future. But I would like to present what is happening today. And I would like to emphasize the humanity's unsustainable consumption. I will talk about some technologies. And in the end, I would like to give you some ideas about the challenges and the future, past, present, and the future of consumption. I would like to start with this, statement: the humanity's unsustainable consumption. Why do we have unsustainable consumption? We need to really understand the past trend to talk about the future. And this is a figure coming from the Global Footprint Network, and which presents different countries in this bubble diagram. And in the y-axis, we have the total resource consumption. We call it total ecological footprint. And on the x-axis, we have human development index. It's quite interesting. We have some countries here, they have quite high human development index. That means they have high longevity, access to education and income. But at the same time, their ecological footprint per capita is above the limit. And we see some countries located in this region, and these countries, they have very low human development index, but their ecological footprint per capita is less than the limit. So we might see two different clusters in this diagram: countries enjoying the consumption with high human development. And there are some countries, they have poor conditions. They are not consuming a lot, but in the same time, their ecological footprint is really, really low. This is another interesting diagram coming from Global Footprint Network, is showing the current ecological deficit. It is a global figure. And we have here two important metrics, like ecological footprint versus the biocapacity. The ecological footprint is related to our consumption, and the biocapacity is what we have. And starting from 1971, you can see that we start having an increasing ecological deficit. So that means we are consuming more than what we can generate and what Earth can generate. And if a region biocapacity exceeds its ecological footprint, it has a biocapacity reserve. But when we look at this figure, we can see that starting from 1971, we start seeing an increasing ecological deficit in the Earth. And finally, this is another important diagram, is also presenting the world GDP per capita. As you can see, we have an increasing GDP. We have an increasing consumption. We have an increasing production. But in the same time, world biocapacity per capita is decreasing. So that means resources are becoming less abundant, but in the same time, we have a growing GDP per capita. So these are some of the interesting figures can present the current condition related to our consumption. And of course, the technology plays a very critical role, and they shape the future of consumption. And like few examples, the Amazon's like cashierless checkout system at its grocery stores. People are talking about a new way of retail stores. Simply, they will come and they will pick the products and they will leave the store without a cashier. And you might see this vehicle in the streets, like the Uber and Lyft. They partner with different autonomous vehicle companies, and they are trying to expand the driverless experience for their customers. And augmented reality is another interesting and important technology, and it enables the consumers try garments, shoes, and it creates a personalized and engaging experience for them. And this is another consumption category, which is transportation. And the Volvo car, for example, they are integrating and testing a new wireless charging technology in a live city environment. We have 3D printing technologies, and this is an NSF funded project, US National Science Foundation, and they are talking about the 3D printing food, and they are trying to print the novel foods using a 3D printer. And this is another important consumption category, which is the construction sector. And this is a 3D printing company. Icon produced a 250 square foot tiny home that cost $10,000 and took just 48 hours to build. So technology will continue to shape the future of consumption, but in the same time, it will have some rebound effects. It might also catalyze the consumption, as these products might be cheaper for the consumers, and it might have some side effects. I would like to also talk about some important factors that can influence the future of consumption. I think the number one factors will be the sustainability and ethics. And first of all, the eco-conscious choices are increasingly becoming important, and also the consumers are increasingly prioritize the eco-conscious choices, and the circular economy is another interesting, a factor and a driver for today's consumption. And there is a shift towards the circular economy where the products are designed for reuse, repair, and recycling. And the companies are also, they need to, adopt the circularity, strategies for, satisfying their customers' needs related to circularity. And finally, the experience over ownership, and it is a part of a sharing economy. And there is a shift from owning products to valuing experiences, especially for the young generations. And this is one interesting example from an IKEA company, and they have a product as service strategy. And in this project, they call it a furniture as a service. And IKEA is engaged with a furniture leasing project. And this sample project is coming from world's tallest green building, Taipei 101. And in this business model, IKEA makes and lease with this, company. And at the end of the lease, IKEA will take back all the furniture, refurbishing and resell it. So this is a very emerging way of consuming, and it's called as a product as service rather than ownership. And of course, the digital transformation is very critical. And after sustainability related factors, we can say that the digital transformation will play a significant role for the future of consumption. We know that e-commerce and omni-channel retail and online shopping and the personalization and the blockchain technologies, they will greatly shape the consumption. And especially nowadays, we are talking about the generative AI and artificial intelligence and the machine learning technologies. And it will also give a lot of options for the consumers for having a personalized choices, and the consumers receive a tailored recommendations based on their preferences and behaviors, so that the technology, the data, and particularly the AI will give the consumers more options to choose the consumption. And challenges are always there. And we talk about technology, but there are significant challenges also related to the future of consumption. The first, we are talking about the technological disruption. I think this is one of the most important challenges. And especially we are talking about automation and AI. And this rise of automation and AI could lead to significant job displacements in the world. And of course, this will have a significant also impact on the purchasing power of the people. And the e-commerce is significantly growing, and there is a shift to online shopping, and it is transforming the retail sector, and also it is increasing the consumption of the people. Resource scarcity and sustainability, I think we need to really understand the issues related to resource depletion and the climate change. This is a figure coming from European Commission and showing the most critical metals and the minerals and their availability. And you can see that most of the metals, the minerals are located in Russia, China, the United States. And these rare metals and minerals are heavily consumed by the emerging technologies that are shaping, our consumption patterns. So these dependencies will continue to be challenging for the consumers and also producers. Fragility of the global supply chains, I think this is also very critical, and especially events like COVID-19 and geopolitical conflicts have exposed vulnerabilities in global supply chains, and it is highlighted the need for the necessity for the resilient and adaptable system. This is just one figure showing the route of grain transportation. And I am living in this city. This is Istanbul, and before the war, the grains were mainly coming from Ukraine, from the Odessa port, and we were just bringing them to Istanbul. Then we were distributing these grains to African countries and as well as Europe. But today, we don't have this grain agreement anymore, and particularly for this case, the Ukrainian grains are not distributed other parts of the world. This is a critical and important case because it is clearly showing that the fragility of the global supply chains will be more and more severe, and our growing consumption will be definitely impacted from this type of crisis. And finally, the global inequality will be another challenging factor for our future consumption. And here, differences in consumption levels between developed and developed countries can simply amplify the global inequality. As I presented in my first slide, we saw two clusters: the countries with high economic welfare and high ecological footprint and resource consumption versus countries with poor conditions and less consumption. And global inequalities will be quite important because some vulnerable communities will be heavily impacted from the climate change and water-related shortages. And the global consumption is a global phenomena, and it will have more and more impact on the developing nations. And this is a picture I just take it from World Economic Forum and representing and showing the water scarcity, and is talking about the water refugees, climate-induced, refugees, immigrants will be quite critical, and it will be an important challenge for the future. I would like to summarize my presentation with this slide. I think we need to really think out of the box in terms of innovation and technology, and we need to really understand the socioeconomic, environmental, and ethical consequences of emerging technologies. And here, in one side, we can talk about responsible consumption. The consumers will continue to value, let's say, sustainable products, and it will also catalyze ethical production. It will create less, let's say, waste, and then people need to have also mindful use of the products and services. But in the same time, we have an innovation. So innovation will also play a catalyzer role for having a responsible consumption and responsible innovation. And what is a responsible innovation? We are talking about autonomous vehicles. We are talking about artificial intelligence, generative AI. And the question is, how responsible these technologies? And the ethical considerations will play a critical role. Environmental sustainability will be another determinant, especially all these technologies will continue to harm the environmental system, and they will have a significant ecological footprint. And inclusivity will be another important dimension of the responsible innovation, particularly these technologies, these innovations should be accessible and usable by as many as people, regardless of their gender, race, color, religion, and ethnicity. And finally, the long-term thinking will be very critical for the responsible innovation. It is because the responsible innovation might have positive effects in the long run, so that we are talking about technology, we are talking about innovation, we are talking about autonomous cars, we are talking about, let's say, 3D printed, houses and the buildings. But the question is how these technologies will have an impact in the long run. And we need to really understand the, let's say, the side effects. And that is why the systemic approach and systemic thinking will be very important component of the responsible innovation. Thank you very much.
All right, well done. That was fantastic. This next guest that we have coming up that I'm going to call to a stage in a second is an example of how I see the generosity of our community here in Colorado. When we posted the speakers that are here tonight, a number of people reached out and said, how did you get these speakers for your event tonight? And it was simple. I just asked. And when I was looking for someone to come speak on education, I went through the most influential people in Colorado on education, and I came across Susana. And I put an ask out to our office, and they got back to me in about 24 hours, and they asked, what was the topic? And we went back and forth. And about 3 or 4 days, she had committed. And I just thought that was very cool and very emblematic of what our community is like here. So please welcome Susana Cordova, Commissioner of Colorado Department of Education. She'll be speaking on the future of education.
Thank you. And it's really an honor to be here today to talk with you about the future of education and the work that we're doing with young people. And I think it's really important to ground this conversation in what it is that we're facing today. And if you have been in a classroom in the last 4 years, you know that things have been kind of hard. You can pull headlines from many, many different places. And we know, particularly for our kids in K-12 school, that we're still seeing the effects of school closures, hybrid learning, remote learning, all of the trauma that came out of COVID for our students and for our teachers. We're still seeing enormous declines in attendance. We're starting to see an increase in learning that's happening, but nowhere close to where we were prior to the pandemic. And when we are seeing that recovery, we're not necessarily seeing it equally for all kids. We're definitely seeing the gaps that we had before widen, and kids with more affluence and more access doing better post-COVID, and kids, primarily low-income kids, students of color, actually doing worse than they were. We're also seeing a real epidemic, I think, of the kinds of distractions that have happened when students have spent more and more and more time in a virtual space using social media rather than an in-person space in classrooms. And teachers are really struggling with what it is that they can do to get kids to come back in. It's not all terrible. There are some really good things that are happening. I think we just heard a little bit about the new innovations with technology. So AI in classrooms is certainly beginning to take hold, and people are harnessing it, sometimes in good ways, sometimes maybe in not good ways. But it gives us this opportunity to think about, is this an opportunity to do things differently? Particularly for adolescents, can we rethink what school looked like? How is it that we can harness technology in positive ways? And what are some of the innovations that started during COVID that we should embrace, that we should think about continuing, that we should build on as positive things? I think the most important thing that we should be doing is we should be figuring out how is it that we can get kids back into classrooms? Because as one student said, my goal for this year is to actually learn because I didn't learn last year. And so if that's the landscape, what does that mean? And why do I think this is so important? Well, the reason I think it's so important is I'm a career educator. This is a picture of March 12th, 2020. I was the superintendent in the Denver Public Schools, and this was the day that we were announcing that we were going to go on what I was calling at that point an extended spring break. We thought it was going to be 3 weeks. It turned into many, many, many weeks as we grappled with the shutdown from COVID, as we tried to figure out what is school even going to look like, as we tried to determine what does it mean to give a quality education in a landscape where everything is upside down. And so it's really personal to me. It's really important to me. And as I look back, I have my own personal regrets. I have my own personal thoughts about what I wish I had done differently. But I think it's really important to think about the future of education in the context of where we've been. So in 2020, there were over 14 million students who were chronically absent. And adjusting and addressing the learning conditions is going to be so important for us as we think about that. Colorado is a negative outlier when it comes to chronic absenteeism. What we know in Colorado is that we had last year a 31% chronic absentee rate. 31% chronic absentee means that there are 31% of the kids who are missing at least 10% of the school year. Colorado also is an outlier in the number of schools that have a 4-day school week. So think about our rural districts, our mountain communities, places where kids are maybe traveling a fair distance to get to school. Many of those districts, 124 of our districts, only have school 4 days a week. And we've got 30 of those districts that are above the state averages. One district that pops to mind where 60% of their kids are missing more than 10% of 140 days. So their kids are coming to school maybe 120, maybe 125 days in a school year. And there's no way that we're going to address those headlines if kids aren't in school. It's going to be really important. And I think it's really important for us to think about when we think about the future of education, what have we said was quality in the past? How is it that we thought about a good school experience in the past? And, you know, are these headlines something new and different that we have to consider? Well, when you go back in time, if you think about a nation at risk in the 1980s, there were really dire pronouncements. In fact, Howard Gardner said the educational foundations of our society are presently being eroded by a rising tide of mediocrity that threatens the very future of our nation and our future as a people. And that kicked off a whole series of reforms, the standards movement, standardized testing, no child left behind. You can even point to a nation at risk for the race to the top innovations in the Obama era. So lots of work that went into creating quality school experiences. And many of those things just came to a screeching halt when COVID hit. We stopped standardized testing while we were doing that. We had a period of time where we really didn't know what was going on with kids. And we do know that COVID has had an impact on learning time through the school closures, on that dramatic shift to virtual learning, and what it has done in terms of where we are. One of the most distressing pieces of research that I've looked at is this piece here that says that those school closures worldwide in that spring of 2020 likely have led to the loss of 14 million years of life lost. And that's by looking at education levels correlate very strongly to longevity in life, to employment levels, lower levels of education attainment correlate negatively to higher incidences of alcoholism and health concerns. And when you think about kids who are far behind and not catching up, this could have lifelong impacts for our students. And so it's going to be really important for us to do that. It's also had tremendous impacts on the mental health for our students, for our staff as well, but really for our students, it really is, I think, an epidemic in what we're doing to support our young people who are grappling with higher rates of depression and anxiety. And when you think about a quality school experience, we've got to be able to think about how is it that we support kids as they're coming in if they're grappling with those issues. So there are lots of places to look to about what quality looks like in the future. One of the areas that I have found to be most inspirational is the work of an organization called Transcend. They've created a framework that looks at like quality learning for the future for 21st century classrooms. They've created this tool they call the Leaps for 21st Century Learning, and it describes a new vision of what school could look like. created it pre-pandemic. And I was really interested to find out like how much of this is valid for what people are grappling with today. So I did some research. I talked with superintendents from across the country. The superintendent names that you see here are all anonymous. Some folks from Colorado, from other parts of the country, big districts, little districts, rural districts, to get a sense from them, what was your experience coming out of COVID? And what should we be doing differently to make sure that we get our kids back on track? And so they shared with me, they also had like a variety of years of experience, and they shared with me their thoughts on this. So what they have shared with me is that now more than ever, we need to focus on culture in schools. We really need to be thinking about how we are creating quality school experiences with positive school cultures, because if we don't, schools, teachers, and kids will struggle. That we need to be really supporting our educators to have positive mindsets. And for many educators, I think the exhaustion of the COVID pandemic, the lack of substitute teachers, for example, makes it really challenging to have a positive mindset about the work that they're doing with young people. And that at the core, kids can't learn if they're not in a place where they've got positive relationships with the adults around them. So I want to talk a little bit about what the superintendent shared with me. Beth Marsh, who's a superintendent in a large urban district, shared this: teachers aren't leaving schools with strong culture. The pandemic was like a typhoon that hit, and when it left, we saw which buildings were really standing. I mean, this is an analogy from my Sunday school class, right? She said, like literally, you could see the schools with strong foundations. Those schools bounced back in terms of culture. Those schools got their families back in. COVID revealed which leaders were really strong to begin with and which places were kind of rocky. And so now more than ever, we need to be investing in what it looks like to create positive cultures in our schools to help our educators get kids back in. Herbert Wallace talked about the role of educator mindsets. And what he shared was there's this huge opportunity for us to be thinking about how we eliminate deficit thinking and beliefs around a student, to really have these high expectations and think about students being filled with possibility. But I noticed when I go into some of our secondary schools in particular, he shared, kids are in this place of hiding. And he described kids with their hoodie over their head, closing it so there's just a tiny little hole and almost trying to disappear right there in the building. It's like the equivalent, the in-person equivalent of turning your camera off. And kids spent so much time during COVID with cameras off. But the most important thing we can do now is create a cadre of educators who believe deeply in what kids are capable of doing and can pull them out and metaphorically turn the camera back on. And then finally, Winnie Newton shared this about the role of positive relationships. I think that human connection, she shared, the lack of invisibility is paramount. And of course, now, you know, at a time when our kids need this social emotional learning support, social emotional learning is a dirty term. We're having to find other ways to talk about that work that doesn't send people into the stratosphere. But I think connection now is incredibly important. And, you know, obviously, when he's talking a little bit about the culture wars that are happening in schools and how is it that we can create an environment where we talk about connection and belonging without that turning into something that's political. And so what the superintendent shared with me and what I really deeply believe in, that the future of our schools depends on our opportunities to increase real world and career focused learning, that kids will come back in and they'll take the hoodie off when they have the opportunity to be engaged in something that gets them hands-on with something that connects them to their future. That we need to recognize that learning happens not just inside school, but 24 hours a day, wherever we are, and that we should give value to that and actual credit to that. And that we need to create classrooms and schools that recognize student agency, their choices, and their voices in the learning that they want to do. And so what Herbert said was, we're talking about how do you start this work even earlier, not in high school, but even all the way back at the elementary level, where we're talking about career interests or content interests, because if we wait until high school, it's way too late. I think we can start providing these experiences, he said, much earlier. So kids are thinking about what they're interested in before they get there. and they're ready to follow their passions and be excited about coming to school each day. Real world learning creates a different kind of space for kids to learn. On anywhere, anytime learning, Nathan Nichols shared with me, works in a very small rural district. I think it makes sense that we start to recognize when kids are out there learning, they should get credit for it. He works in a small rural community. He said, when our kids are working on the farm, they should get credit in animal science. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me, he said. If a kid's not in my building, but they're learning, then why can't they get credit for what they're learning? That idea that learning doesn't start and stop once you get to school or after you leave. Around student choice, voice, and agency, a mid-sized suburban superintendent shared with me, I've become a real fan of personalized blended learning classrooms, getting kids to own their education. I think it's a big thing, getting kids to early on understand where they are academically and where they need to go. And so that led me to create what I'm calling the framework for learning in a post-pandemic schools that really looks at creating environments that support the relationships and connections that are so important for learning, that we have learning experiences that really emphasize high expectations, rigor, real world opportunities, and that we recognize that learning happens anywhere, in our school, outside of our school, and with credit, so that we're actually putting value on the work that kids are doing. So it's kind of easy to talk about those things, but I'd love to, as we think about that, give you an example of what it looks like right here in Colorado. In the Durango School District, the Durango schools have leaned into what it means to engage in work around their portrait of a graduate. And so let's see if we can get this to work. Here we go. Okay.
Beyond what we can imagine today. Problems and possibilities that will demand empathy, resilience, creativity, agility, confidence, and courage.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Nina.
Whether this year's kindergarten student will merely survive or positively thrive in the decades to come depends in large measure on the experiences she has in school. Those experiences will be shaped by adults, by peers, and ultimately by the physical environments where she does her learning. United by our passion to promise every student their portrait of a graduate for future success, we are designing and redesigning today's schools for tomorrow's world. One example of how we are building for our student future success is our Impact Center. When our community supported a bond to build a career and innovation center, rather than look backwards at the former models of those buildings where one or two programs would be developed, we asked ourselves, what does the workplace of today look like? What would a building look like if we wanted the POG to thrive there? What kind of place would set students up for their success after they graduate? Our design team came up with a novel idea. What if we built a place where students would be able to engage in every part of the design process? They could empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. We came up with a building that is not adult-centric. It's not even program-centric. It's a student-centric place where they will impact their community by designing real-life solutions to real-life problems, putting their career and technical education to the test. The Impact Career Innovation Center is built to be a professional entrepreneurial environment that is flexible for relevance, celebrates the design process, fosters collaborative collisions, and is committed to sustainability.
Hey, you, call 911. Hey, you, go get the AED. You like
Using the same design ideas, we also want to renovate to innovate our classrooms so that students can gain industry experience, develop their POG competencies, and be future focused in their learning. Check out this health sciences classroom, Last year was just a traditional classroom.
This space used to be a computer lab.
The teacher worked with his students to design a space with industry standard equipment, mimicking the layout of the spaces and tools of the health sciences field.
So we imagined this space being what you're seeing today. It mimics a hospital and a clinic setting, and the students have the availability to
If you don't mind pulling your sample all the way up.
practice their skills repetitively to where they can master their skills. So when they get into an internship and they start shadowing clinicians, it's not the first time they've ever attempted these skills. The feedback is that it's awesome. The students are super excited. They love to do hands-on activities.
Okay, clear.
They love that it's student-led, and they feel that what they're doing is meaningful.
And after this, I'm planning on getting my EMT, and then I'm gonna look to do a firefighter 1 class so I can become a firefighter/EMT out of high school.
The redesign of the classroom has caused innovation in the curriculum and changes in the roles of teacher and students.
How this would work in a real scenario is that.
We are redesigning our instruction, student experiences, and our classrooms for a future focus as we empower our students
Nick, what artery's down there?
with their life-ready portrait of a graduate skills. There are many other classrooms following the same renovation for innovation so that all students can find their passions and develop their life skills.
So that's an example of what the future in education looks like even today. So thank you for your time. I'm glad to be able to share this with you.
Thank you. That was awesome. So our next presenter tonight, he is going to go without any slides, which I was very impressed when I heard that. So I'm looking forward to seeing him come up here. So please welcome to the stage, Claude Distray. He is professor of international law and international studies with the Josef Korbel School of International Studies. Let's give him a big round of applause. Thank you.
Subset of climate migration. That seed of interest then blossomed when I was invited up to CSU in October of 2014 to hear and meet Mary Robinson, first woman president of Ireland, former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, UN Special Rapporteur for Climate Change, recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, member of the Elders, a group of senior international leaders formed by Nelson Mandela, and president of and founder of the Mary Robinson Foundation. Now, clearly, that's somebody, given the opportunity to meet somebody like that, you would want to listen to that person very carefully. While listening to President Robinson, I had one of those aha moments, perhaps not as profound as Paul on his way to Damascus, but very much life and perspective changing nonetheless. I wish all of you at least to have one or two of those aha moments in your life as well. President Robinson and I followed up with a very long conversation and then kept an email conversation and dialogue for many years following that meeting. Her work inspired me to create a course on climate justice and then to take my sabbatical in Aotearoa, New Zealand, to work with Maori and Pacifica colleagues on climate migration and climate refugees, and to create a brand new course that I'm teaching for the first time this quarter on climate migration and human rights. The subtitle of that course is The Tsunami. Now, perhaps you have not had any firsthand experiences with the tsunami. That would not be unusual, but most of you have seen video clips of tsunamis as they have hit the coast of Japan, for instance, or rolled into a luxury resort on an island nation in the Pacific somewhere. I also hope that most of you know what the signs of an impending tsunami are and what you should do. If you should find yourself on the beach playing in the sand and surf, and suddenly you watch as the water recedes quite rapidly and moves way past the low tide mark, what should you do? Anyone? Run. Thank you. Yes. And as fascinating and as unusual as the sight may be, you should immediately run to higher ground. Don't pick up your cooler. Don't stop to get your towel and your umbrella. Turn around and run. But sadly, that's not what many people do. They stare transfixed like deer in headlights, and only when it is clearly too late do they finally turn around and try to run. This is where we are now. The water has already receded, and we stand dumbstruck, staring out into the ocean. Perhaps you have also seen on these video clips, what a tsunami wave actually looks like. It isn't the seemingly 200-foot waves cresting majestically and terrifyingly in its awesome qualities that you see in some disaster movies. From land, it is sometimes almost imperceptible to the eye. As it draws closer to land and encounters the ocean shelf, it starts to rise up. Tsunamis may be as long as 60 miles in width, but the average height is only 10 feet. But when a 10-foot, 60-mile wave hits at 100 miles per hour, the wall of trillions of gallons of water wreaks unimaginable havoc. And it isn't just one wave. A tsunami wave train can come as a series of surges anywhere from 5 minutes to 1 hour apart. Now, climate migrants are known by a number of different kinds of terms: climate refugees, climate mobility, and environmental migrants, to be a few. The term that seems to capture the imagination of the public is climate refugees. But what is a climate refugee? The term has been used since 1985 when UN environmental program expert Ihsan El-Henawi defined climate refugees as people who have been, quote, forced to leave their traditional habitat temporarily or permanently because of environmental disruption. But Amar Rahman, global head of climate resilience at Zurich Resilience Solutions, believes that the definition should apply to, quote, anyone who has been impacted by disruption in their society that could somehow directly or indirectly be related to short or long-term change in the environment. Unfortunately, this doesn't match the international legal definition of a refugee. We have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, which guarantees that everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the border of each state, that everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and return to his country, that everyone has the right to seek and enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution, that everyone has the right to a nationality, and that no one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality nor denied the right to change his nationality. The 1951 UN Refugee Convention defines a refugee as a person owing to well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality and is unable, or owing to such fear, is unwilling to avail himself of the protection of that country. So a refugee has to cross an international border. If they don't, they're an IDP, an internally displaced person, and are not covered by the Refugee Convention and all of its resources. And even if they flee across an international border because of a short-term environmental disaster or long-term environmental issues that make a livelihood impossible, they are not covered by the Refugee Convention. So some of us had the bright, if naive, idea of changing the Refugee Convention to include climate refugees. Changing the language of a convention isn't an easy process. It takes a gathering of 193 nations to agree upon a new protocol to the convention. But it had been done before with other conventions, so why not the Refugee Convention? I have to say, what we didn't expect was the massive pushback by UN organizations tasked with dealing with refugees. At this point, the term climate refugee is actually verboten in places like Geneva and Vienna. Instead, they use the term environmental migrants. Why is this? Well, it's because the UN High Commissioner for Refugees is already completely overwhelmed by refugees that they have. Here are some numbers. There are 108.4 million forcibly displaced people worldwide. 62.5 million are internally displaced persons. 29.4 million are refugees as understood by the Refugee Convention. 52% originate from only 3 countries, Syria, Afghanistan, and now Ukraine. 70% of refugees are hosted in 5 neighboring countries, Turkey, Iran, Colombia, Germany, and Pakistan. 43.3 million, or 40% of the 108.4 million, are children below the age of 18. And between 2018 and 2022, 1.9 million children were born into refugee life per year. 4.4 million people are stateless. They have no place to return. And 90% of refugees under the UN mandate are from countries, quote, quoting from the United Nations, on the front lines of the climate emergency. The top 10 refugee camps, some of whom have been in existence for decades, hold 2.2 million of those refugees, the largest being in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh with 887,000 refugees. Bangladesh is also one of the poorest nations, yet hardest hit by climate change and their own IDP crisis. So keep these numbers in mind. I'll repeat them a little bit when we get to the numbers of climate refugees. We know that we're hoping to have only a 1.5 degree change or increase in global temperature. That will bring major effects on warm water coral reef ecosystems, specifically impacts on vulnerable ecosystems and species, especially the polar regions, wetlands, and cloud forests. Increase in coastal and river flooding, increase in extreme weather events, increase in the spread of tropical infectious disease, increase in heat-related morbidity and mortality. Also keep in mind that 40% of the world population lives within 60 miles of the coast, as we get concerned about the rise of sea levels. 50% of the United States population, which lives within 50 miles of the coast. That accounts for 167 million of us. And 40% of those, or 134 million, are vulnerable to sea level rise in the United States. 20% of the Earth will be a hot zone by 2070. What's a hot zone? A hot zone is a place where agriculture is almost dead, where nothing grows. By 2070, that's 20%. It's only 1% right now, and it will affect 1/3 of the population of the world. So you might not care about sea level rise. We're in Denver, we're a mile high, but there will be a 50% increase of wildfires by 2100. 100-year floods could happen annually by 2100. Remember that this is what happens with a 1.5 degree increase. A large and growing number of scientists are now saying that we're going to blow way past 1.5 degrees. I won't go into what 2 to 3 degrees, or let alone 3 to 4 degrees, is going to bring. If we go back to the tsunami image, these are the conditions that lead all the water rushing away from the shore. What does the wave look like? This first figure is from the World Bank, a rather conservative institution who is not interested in fear-mongering and upsetting markets, right? The World Bank states that there will be 216 million climate refugees by 2050. That's only 26 years from now. That's an 8 times increase in the number of refugees in the world today. The Institute for Economics and Peace states by 2015, there will be 1.2 billion people displaced by the climate change. Right now, there's 108.4 million. That's an 11-time increase in the number of people who are going to be displaced in the next 26 years. And if you think this hasn't started in the United States, then I remind you of Katrina in 2005, of whom, which happened especially in the 9th Ward during Hurricane Katrina, and of whom some of those families went, unfortunately, off to Houston only to lose everything again from Hurricane Harvey in 2017. Those were IDPs, internally displaced persons, though we dare not politically call them that, let alone call them climate refugees. Or the Isle de Jean-Charles, which was once 22,000 acres and is now only 320 acres, with a first ever federal government community development block grant to Louisiana of $48.3 million to move the entire remaining Biloxi Chickamauga Choctaw tribe 40 miles north. Or the central Yupik, Alaska native village of Newtok, forced to move 250 people at a cost of $300 million, 7 miles inland. Or perhaps the Inuit tribe in Kavalina, Alaska, whose island is warming twice as fast as anywhere else. They have been asking for funds since 1992 and have received nothing. Their tribe will be forced to break up and become climate refugees or starve to death. Newtok and Kavalina are only 2 of dozens of communities on the brink of sinking into the ocean in Alaska alone. Or even Captain Dan from Miami, who has lived there all his life and watched the sea level rise since the mid-70s. He is selling his home and moving because his state government is in denial. And he wants to sell before others realize how untenable the future of his neighborhood will soon be. Harold Walness, as a side, who's a university professor there and a scientist, has been warning Miami about the effects of climate change since 1981. Flooding in Miami has increased by 400% in the last decade. And as an interesting little note, he claims that Miami will be around for less than 100 years and that Mar-a-Lago will become a diver's Atlantis paradise. The governor's office does not even allow the words climate change or global warming in its reports or communications. So how are you, my entrepreneurs, my builders, to respond to all this? You could build walls along the borders, 2,000 miles for the Mexico-US border, 5,500 miles in the Canadian-US border, but that doesn't solve 2 major problems. In my world of migrants, the answer to a 10-foot wall is an 11-foot ladder. And it doesn't answer the problem of US IDPs. Newtok, Kavalina, New Orleans, Isle de Jean-Charles, Miami are only the beginning. Resilience and adaptation are the key words and concepts. New, bold, risky, and innovative ideas. What will you do with these people on the move? Build more refugee camps where people and families languish for decades? Or create jobs and opportunities that look toward not just sustainability, but a regenerative future? The examples are out there, and they range all the way from the Netherlands to Bangladesh. The Mary Robinson Foundation articulated 7 principles of climate justice, and for time's sake, I'm just going to give you the bullet points. 1, respect human rights. 2, support the right to development. 3, share benefits and burdens equitably. 4, ensure that decisions on climate change are participatory, transparent, and accountable. 5, highlight gender equality and equity. 6, harness the transformative power of education for climate stewardship. And 7, use effective partnerships to secure climate justice. The Stockholm Resilience Center at Stockholm University has its own 7 principles. Spend just a tiny bit more with them. The first one is maintain diversity and redundancy. They say in a social ecological system, components such as species, landscape types, knowledge systems, actors, cultural groups, or institutions all provide different options for responding to change and dealing with uncertainty and surprise. 2, manage connectivity. Connectivity can be both a good and a bad thing. High levels of connectivity can facilitate recovery after a disturbance, but highly connected systems can also spread disturbances faster, as we well know. 3, manage slow variables and feedbacks. Social ecological systems can often be configured in several different ways. In other words, there are many ways in which all the variables in a system can be connected and interact with one another, and these different configurations provide different ecosystem services. 4, foster complex adaptive systems thinking. In order for us to continue to benefit from a range of ecosystem services, we need to understand the complex interactions and dynamics that exist between actors and ecosystems in a social ecological system. Management based on complex adaptive systems thinking that appreciates these interactions and the often complex dynamics they create can enhance the resilience of social ecological systems. 5, encourage learning. Knowledge of a system is always partial and incomplete, and social ecological systems are no exception. Efforts to enhance the resilience of social ecological systems must therefore be supported by continuous learning and experimentation. 6, we're almost there, broaden participation. Participation through active engagement of all relevant stakeholders is considered fundamental to building social ecological resilience. It helps build the trust and relationships needed to improve legitimacy of knowledge and authority during decision-making processes. And 7, promote polycentric governance systems. Polycentricity, a governance system in which multiple governing bodies interact to make and enforce rules within a specific body, specific policy, arena or location is considered to be one of the best ways to achieve collective action in the face of disturbance and change. Which suggests that the combination of these two sets of principles are a winning combination. They overlap, they inform, and support each other. If you guide your sense of entrepreneurship with these principles, not only will you benefit yourselves and your investors, but also your community. Just don't survive, flourish. I noticed that on the front of the garage, you put in a very bold the statement, make something people want. Might I suggest just a small change to the wording? Make something people need. Thank you.
Thanks.
We might have to make that change. That was awesome. So our final speaker tonight will come up in a second. And this is somebody that I've gotten to know. And every time we hang out, we have a topic and we seem to get off topic for about an hour to try to bring it back. Because it's someone that's interested in the outdoors, biking, technology, entrepreneurship. So kind of all my same interests as well. So please welcome John Winsor, author, entrepreneur, and entrepreneur in residence. He's going to talk to us, finish out the night, the future of work.
Thanks so much. Hey, baby. Good to see you. Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I was thinking on the way up here today that in 1985, I was over in Sturm with the first class in the entrepreneur program. And, it's been, 39 years, and I can't believe that it's been that long. What was so great is I launched a company out of the entrepreneur program, and 15 years later, sold it to Condé Nast. So I've had this nice run of stuff, and I've ended up at Harvard. So I've got a chance to do a lot of really interesting work. And I'm working right now in this area of what's the future of talent, future of work? How are we all going to have jobs? In our vision, I really believe it's going to have a portfolio of jobs that will have some full-time engagements, some part-time engagements, but really this kind of new way of thinking. We just came out with a book about 2 months ago, hit the bestseller list. Harvard Business Review was kind enough to publish it, but open talent, leveraging the global workforce to solve your biggest challenges. It's a book for companies on how to work with people in a new way. I work at a lab called the Laboratory for Innovation Sciences at Harvard, where we study this, and we study a lot of AI things as well. So I'd like to just kind of tell you some stories from the book, hopefully some inspirations, and then have a dialogue afterwards. The goal of the book was to create common language and common process for the future of talent and work. And our goal, and we believe that open talent represents a digital transformation of total talent. Right now in most companies, talent's really bifurcated, right? There's HR on one side of things, and on the other side of things, there's procurement that hires for staffing and outsourcing. It's very confusing, it's balkanized, and it's really hard to understand who's doing what inside of a large company. We try to set a new standard, a new process to think about this stuff. A lot of people ask, what's the difference between the open talent economy and the gig economy? So for us, the open talent economy is the digital transformation of talent through a globally distributed workforce, accessible to companies on demand via digital connections and platforms. It represents the rise of micro entrepreneurs who look at work as a thing to do, fitting into their lifestyles instead of a place to go or a definition of who they are. Contrast that with the gig economy. It consists mainly of business to consumers transactions such as drivers and passengers or restaurants and takeout food customers. Gig workers are told where to work and how to deliver the product. So how did all this happen? I was on a conversation the other day with somebody out of the Netherlands, and she pointed this out. And these are some of the facts that I think are really interesting. I'm 64 years old, supposed to be retiring next year, probably in no time soon. But I find these trends really worrisome, right? The number of people entering the workforce, the blue line in all these countries, the US, Japan, Western Europe, and China, and the red line is those folks retiring. And the question is, in this kind of dynamic, how are we going to have enough people to support those of us who are retiring? And what are we going to do with this gap, especially in an economy or in a world where immigration is really looked down upon? My hunch is it's going to be a lot more digital in immigration, that we're going to find people around the world to do the work we need to do, but stay where they are. So digitally being able to immigrate to the different jobs, and we're seeing that happen globally. As all of us know, digital technology is radically reorganizing society day to day. And one of the examples that somebody brought up to me the other day when I was giving a speech is, hey, let's say we are all, in Boston, right? And we want to go to a dry cleaners. In 2007, we'd pull out this thing called the Yellow Pages, and some of you guys don't even know what Yellow Pages are, probably never even heard of that. And I read some facts the other day when I was doing some research. How much do you think the Yellow Pages in Boston cost to produce? Anybody guess? Throw out a number. Nobody? $100 million. It was $100 million to produce the phone book in Boston. Obviously, it was very profitable because $250 million of advertising. But contrast that to today, same goal, find a dry cleaner in Boston. Today, it's free. Go to Google, there we go, get information the day before, exactly what happened, what was the experience that people had. Radical changes that we're seeing kind of underpin the future of work. I love this, I use this in the book. Easter morning, 1900, Fifth Avenue, spot the automobile, one automobile, right? 13 years later, Easter morning, 1913, there was one horse in the street. So we might not think things happen very fast, but that's from 2010 to 2013 or 2023, right? That much change would have happened. So for me, digital technology has allowed the rise of a new class of creators and freelancers by radically reducing the cost of production. I want to give you a couple examples that we studied in the book. Meet Jan. She's in Portland, Oregon. And unfortunately, Jan lost her job during COVID. She was a low-level bookkeeper, made about $40,000 a year. Really tragically, she got COVID as well. Single mom, 2 kids, 2 daughters. She had to go on assistance. She was really worried about what she was going to do. After a couple months, she recovered, had some assistance, went out to some platforms, Upwork, Fiverr, and a couple of other platforms, put out a shingle, and she said, I'll do companies' books for $800 a month. 2 months later, guess how many companies she was working for? There were 32 companies, and she was making about $330,000 a year. So in about 6 months, she went from making $40,000 a year for working from a mid-level bookkeeping company or accounting company to doing her own thing on her own, making 7 or 8 times that. Who knows who this is? Jimmy Chin, exactly. Jimmy's a great buddy, climbing partner, met him in the Valley a long time ago. And with Jimmy in the Valley, he was living in his car, right? He had one sponsor, the North Face. And for Jimmy to make a living, he had to actually go to Outside Magazine and beg the editor of Outside Magazine to write an article about a trip he would be taking. knowing that if he did a trip, that he'd get some sponsorship dollars, right? So he'd get an editor to assign a writer and a photographer to a trip. So for 2 months, they'd go on an adventure. For 2 months, they would write the article and get the article ready, take a couple months to produce the magazine, and a couple more months to distribute the magazine. At the end of that, Jimmy would get a bonus. So you've got 8 months, and the magazine would reach 800,000 people, and it would cost the North Face $250,000 for an ad. Well, think about Jimmy today. Now Jimmy has 3.7 million followers on Instagram. And when somebody wants to reach his audience, let's just say it's Range Rover. Range Rover calls Jimmy and says, hey, can you take a couple photos and put some photos up on Instagram for me? Jimmy will say, yeah, I'm in Jackson. I got some buddies climbing this weekend. Drop off a couple cars. We'll drive around while we're climbing. I'll take a couple photos, and on Monday morning, I'll post them. I charge 50 grand per photo. So all these people, 8 months to get this job done of putting a magazine in hands and letting North Face, a sponsor, advertise for 250,000 people to reach 800,000, $250,000 to reach 800,000 people now is a couple days, and that money goes directly into the pocket of Jimmy. The radical shifts of the production of marketing materials has given Jimmy new opportunities and spread that. What we're seeing, I grew up in the advertising community, and one of the things that I really am blown away by is when I had a company called Victors and Spoils. There were about 500,000 people working in advertising, and last year there were 2 million. What we don't account for is that it's gone from 0 to 200 million creators that are making money in marketing, working with brands and social media. Just a radical shift in competition, who can do the work, the digital transformation of an industry in a huge way. And look at the economic impact. On YouTube alone, $25 billion of marketing dollars are spent and goes to individuals. That's the contribution to the US GDP, equaling 425,000 full-time jobs. So for us, open talent represents the democratization of work. And finding tech talent is even harder. We know from Korn Ferry that by 2030, 85 million tech jobs will go unfilled globally. That means that companies are putting out job requests for those 85 million jobs, and there aren't the talent globally to get that done. It's going to cost companies $8.5 trillion. So from our perspective, the war for talent is over. It's a re-equilibrium, and talent has won. All of a sudden, supply has the power more than the demand does. So no matter who you are, the best talent doesn't want to work for you. They've got choice. You especially see that in new places that we're studying in AI and development, software development for AI. So let's pull back to space for a second. I want to talk about some of the projects we've done at LISH, at the Laboratory for Innovation Sciences at Harvard. We work with NASA. LISH started because we got a call from this guy, Jeff Davis. Jeff Davis in 2007 got a budget cut of 80% for his health and human services part of NASA. And it was horrifying for him. He had 20% of the budget to actually keep astronauts alive in space. So can you imagine that? I've got 20% of the budget, but I know people are going to die doing this or could die. How do I keep them safe? So he called Kareem Lakhani, the guy that I work with at the lab, and they started playing with this concept called crowdsourcing. And one of the questions that Jeff had was, how do we increase the prediction time for sunspots to keep astronauts alive in space? You see, one of the issues is that when somebody's out on a spacewalk in the space station, they can be way out there doing a really important job that they've trained a lifetime for, and to get back into the space station, into a secure place, takes about an hour and a half time. Well, Jeff, over 10 years, had 8 of the best heliophysicists in the world working on this problem, spending about $2 million a year. And the results? Well, they produced an algorithm that could predict sunspots in an hour and a half with 50% accuracy. But what Jeff was fearful of and experienced was that most astronauts flipped the coin and didn't want to come in. Like, they couldn't get back in anyway. If it's a 50-50 odds, why would they go back? They got to get their job done. This is an important job they've been hired to do. So Kareem and Jeff hooked up with this guy through a platform called Wazoku, or it used to be called Innocentive. Bruce Cragen, retired cell phone engineer, had a little bit of experience with heliophysics in his graduate work, but really he knew radiation because he was working on cell phone towers, terrestrial cell phone towers. Well, how do you think Bruce did? This is one retired engineer. He had 3 weeks to do the project, $35,000. Now remember, 8 of the best heliophysicists in the world, 10 years, $20 million. Comparison. He did pretty well. Created an algorithm with 24 hours prediction time, 75% accuracy, about a 30-time gain. This created a system inside NASA that we've built. We built the NASA Tournament Lab, which ladders up to another thing we call the Center for the Transformational Work, Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation at NASA. And these two efforts allow NASA to tap into 110 million people across the globe. Next year, NASA's budget for COSI will be $1 billion. And the results that we found in our studies, LISH actually ladders up to D-Cubed, which is Digital Design and Data Institute at Harvard. We found that 314 projects, we see as good or equal results, 4 to 5 times faster and 8 to 10 times cheaper when we're using kind of this global workforce. So in the book, we built this transformation of work model. We're really trying to encourage companies to go through a process of finding new ways to work with people. And in it, the center is the networked organization. If you look back at NASA, you could say, you could really have two mindsets, right? NASA is either a world-class innovation organization that has 17,000 full-time employees. That's one way to look at it, one mindset. The other mindset is to say it's a networked organization that's 17,000 full-time employees that's connected with a platform we created called NASA at Work that connects those employees to their 30,000 contractors, and then connects to, with COSI, connects to 110 million folks. So you could say it's a networked organization that can tap into 110 million, 47,000 people. So kind of an interesting contrast in mindset on how to think about things. So the process that we've created in the book is this idea of transforming your mindset and transforming your culture to be a network culture, to assess the needs of the organization, to learn and experiment around new kinds of tools with open talent, to build. And the build, we talk about 3 things: building an external talent cloud, building an internal talent marketplace, and also building open innovation capabilities. And likewise, scaling. Scaling is only happening with a few companies. UST that we just did a case study on, NASA, SCI is a software company, but it's just an emerging field. From a strategy standpoint, focusing on growth and the mindset of curiosity and a culture of light and fast. But one of the things I want to talk about, because there's some students in the audience, there's so many shifts going on, is how do we work in this new world of work, right? Where we're not going to have permanent jobs, we're not going to have longevity of a career, we're going to have portfolios of work, possibly no career at all. We'll be bouncing around and having lots of things to do. What's this mean for you? I tried to address this a few weeks ago in a Harvard Business Review article that I wrote. And let me just share some of the findings that we found in the research and some of the ideas. First, leverage digital platforms and networks. You got to establish a really strong online presence. All of us have to be publishing articles, points of view, contributing to a network, contributing to a conversation. Whatever field you decide to be in, it's important to do that. Engage with professional communities, be here, be active, meet people, and showcase your work, whether that's on LinkedIn or wherever you decide to do that, Instagram, wherever it is. The second thing is use those open talent and freelance networks as your secret sauce. One of the things we're seeing in our studies, right, is that open talent, lots of companies haven't really adopted open talent as a corporate policy. Yet we know that a lot of people inside that. We did a study with freelancer.com, which is an Australian big platform. They only work with 24 Fortune 500 companies. Yet we know from the data that there are 70% of Fortune 500 companies have an active email, corporate email, working on the platform on a week-to-week basis. So you're seeing this big bottom-up movement where people are accelerating their own careers by using talent platforms. I'm going to get somebody in Ukraine that's a graphic designer that can help me design a deck overnight instead of waiting 3 weeks to do a deck with, my corporate graphic design department. I'm going to have somebody do some data science that can really help me accelerate the work I'm doing, those kinds of things. So number one, identify tasks that can be delegated in your work. Number two, utilize freelance platforms. There are 1,000 platforms out there, and lots of really specific platforms you can work on. And number 3, foster long-term relationships. Build your own team, figure out people that can work for you and do great work and really accelerate your career. We just held this at Harvard 2 weeks ago, Lead with AI, Exploring Business and Technology Frontiers. The thing that blew us away, we started this in October. We invited 300 people to discuss AI. 1,200 people showed up and 6,000 people online. AI is a pretty hot topic right now. So it was really fun to explore. A lot of corporate leaders from around the world were talking about what they were doing inside their companies, how not so much how LLMs are being built and the technology, but it was about how big companies and large organizations globally are applying AI inside their organizations. And I love this. Kareem, who ran the session, AI won't replace humans, but humans with AI will replace humans without AI. So we need to all be using these tools and figure out how they fit into our lives and into our work every day. Has anybody read this book? Ethan Malik kicked off the conference, and it was just mind-blowing, some of his work. So this is a highly recommended book. Really, it's his first experiments. He works at Wharton, teaches the entrepreneur class, and it's a really important work because it's just the first touch of how you can use it, what it means for entrepreneurs, but definitely highly recommended. So when we talk about harnessing the power of AI to become superhuman, there's really 3 things that I think about. Automate routine tasks. How can I use it for the things I do every day? How do I enhance decision-making? You know, one of the things, that chart that I came up with, right, to begin with on the retirees and the folks kind of not coming into the workforce, I had somebody that I worked with spend about a week and a half doing the research on that. And it was great. It was a long deck. There was a lot of really great texts. And then I went to ChatGPT and asked a simple thing, you know, come up with this chart, you know, build this thing. And I was blown away. That was the chart that ChatGPT came up with. Now, when I asked for references, they had very technical references from all the government information and statistics from around the world, from the US, you know, Bureau of Labor, from Western European Bureau, from China. And so it's really interesting to see these things in the amount of time that it saves you to do it, just being curious. The last thing is stay informed and upskill. Really share this openly. I think a lot of people right now are really scared of AI, what it means for us individually and what it means for culture. I hear whispers of people using it, but not openly. I think we need to open it up and share what's happening with OpenAI. It's going to, not just OpenAI, generative AI. I think it's going to have a huge effect not only on work, and it's going to have a huge effect in the fields that we're working with on open talent and in the future of work. And something we're going to keep an eye on. But it's important to all of us to have a dialogue. That's what I got. Thanks for having me. You guys, off to dinner. Thanks, man.
Hey, let's please give a big round of applause for all of our speakers tonight. They were awesome. So I want to just close with a couple things. I'm very optimistic about the future and the opportunities in the future, but I'm also a realist that there's a lot of challenges. But when I look at challenges, I think that's a perfect opportunity to innovate, to solve problems, to make fundamental changes. So I think the opportunity for all of us is to look at the challenges right now, the challenges in the future, and to look at where the opportunities are. Because those opportunities, when we make change, has a chance to really move humanity forward. So thank you all for coming tonight. Be well.